I still remember the first time I saw her, standing on my front porch, holding a casserole dish, pretending to be kind. Her name was Clara Monroe, and she smiled like a woman who'd never done wrong in her life. But I knew, oh, I knew, that smile had already taken everything from me. My name is Helen Porter. I was married to Jack for 32 years. We built our home in a small town outside of Richmond, where the summers smelled of honeysuckle and gossip traveled faster than wind. Jack and I weren't perfect, no marriages, but I believed we had what it took to grow old together. Until the day Clara moved into the neighborhood. She was younger than me, with red hair and a laugh that echoed down the street. Jack used to fix things for her, a loose fence, a dripping faucet. Just being neighborly, he'd say. But neighbors don't usually call your husband at midnight, do they? They don't send him pies on his birthday when you've already baked one yourself. It started with small things. The smell of her perfume on his jacket, receipts for dinners I wasn't invited to. And then one night, he simply didn't come home. The next morning, he confessed, in that cold, quiet way that men do when they've already made up their minds. He said, "Helen, I didn't mean for it to happen, but I love her." I remember that moment as clear as the day my mother died, because something inside me did too. But I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just asked him one question. Does she love you back? He didn't answer. And that silence told me everything. If you've ever trusted someone who broke your heart, you'll understand what I felt that day. Jack left 2 weeks later. Took his clothes, his tools, and even the old coffee mug I'd painted for him on our 10th anniversary. The divorce came fast, like a storm you don't see until it's already tearing your roof off. Everyone in town knew. Some pitied me. Others whispered that maybe I'd let myself go. But I didn't fight back. I didn't throw stones. I let them live their little love story. Because I believed, and I still do, that life has a way of balancing its books. Years passed. I sold the house, moved into a smaller one near the edge of town. My days became simple, gardening, reading, talking to my daughter Lynn on the phone. I thought the past had finally gone quiet until the phone rang one winter evening. It was the hospital. A nurse said a Clara Monroe had been admitted. Serious condition, no family, no one to care for her. And on her admission form, under emergency contact, she had written my name. At first, I thought it was a mistake. But when I arrived at the hospital, there she was, pale, weak, her once glorious hair now thin and gray. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and whispered, "Helen, I had no one else." I could have walked away.
Every part of me wanted to, but something stopped me.
Maybe it was pity. Maybe it was the ghost of the woman I used to be, the one who believed love could fix everything.
So I stayed.
I took her home with me to my home. The same woman who'd broken my marriage now slept in the spare room where my daughter used to play with her dolls. At first, it was unbearable. Every time I heard her cough in the next room, memories flooded back. Jack's laughter, the scent of Clara's perfume, the sound of my own heart breaking. But I had promised myself long ago that I wouldn't let hate live rent-free in my soul. So I cooked for her. I helped her bathe. I sat beside her when the nights grew too long and her pain became too much. She often tried to talk, to explain, but I would stop her. "Not yet," I'd say. Some things need silence before forgiveness. One evening, as I poured her tea, she looked at me with trembling hands and said, "Helen, I don't deserve your kindness. I took everything from you. Jack, he wasn't what I thought he was." I didn't respond. But she went on. "He left me too, you know. 2 years after you. Said he needed space. He never came back." The words hit me like cold water. All those years I'd imagined them living happily, and here she was, abandoned just the same. She reached for my hand, her eyes glossy with tears.
"He used to talk about you.
Said you were the only woman who ever truly understood him." I hated hearing that. But now, I think I understand why. For a long moment, we just sat there. The clock ticked and the old house creaked with age. I felt no joy, no vengeance, just a deep, quiet sadness for the two women who had loved the same flawed man. A few weeks later, Clara's health worsened. The doctors said it was only a matter of time. I stayed by her side, reading to her from an old Bible, holding her hand when the pain became too much. One night, she whispered, "Helen, there's a letter. For you. In the drawer." When I opened it, I found a small envelope addressed in shaky handwriting. Inside was a short note. "You loved him better than I ever could. And still, you had the grace to love me too. I don't know what waits after this life, but I hope I meet you again, just so I can say thank you." She passed the next morning, peacefully. After the funeral, I went to visit Jack's grave. He had died 3 years before, apparently alone, in another state. There were no flowers, no visitors, just a name carved into stone. I stood there for a while, the wind cold against my cheeks. Then I placed Clara's letter beside his grave. "Maybe you'll finally understand what love really meant," I whispered. Sometimes I still set 2 cups on the table out of habit, then I remember I only need one. But that doesn't make me sad anymore. Because I learned something through all this. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about freeing yourself from the chains they left behind. If you've ever had to forgive someone who didn't deserve it, you'll know the peace I found that day. Drop a heart in the comments if you've ever carried pain that took years to let go. Now, when I sit by the window and watch the sun go down, I think of Clara, the woman who stole my husband, but somehow gave me back my soul. Did this story touch your heart? Don't forget to like and subscribe. You know, people often ask me what Jack was like before everything fell apart, before Clara, before the lies, before that long silence that settled between us like dust in an old house. And the truth is, he was kind. At least, that's how I choose to remember him. When I close my eyes, I can still see him coming in from the garden, boots muddy, shirt half-buttoned, carrying a basket of tomatoes. He'd always grin that same boyish grin, the one that made me fall in love with him all those years ago at the county fair.
We met in 1973.
He'd won me a goldfish by tossing a ring at a glass bottle, missed every single time until his last quarter. I remember laughing so hard my stomach hurt, and when that bottle finally rang, he turned to me and said, "See? I told you I'd get it for you." That tiny fish didn't live long, but Jack and we lasted 3 decades. Or so I thought. Our house wasn't much, a little white farmhouse with chipped paint and a porch swing that creaked whenever the wind blew. But it was ours. We built that place piece by piece. He laid the floorboards with his own hands, and I stitched the curtains from old bedsheets. Every morning, I'd wake to the smell of coffee and the sound of the radio, humming some country tune. Jack would already be out in the shed, fixing something that wasn't broken. That man could never sit still. I used to joke that if I ever left him alone long enough, he'd repair the refrigerator until it stopped working. Our life was simple but full. Summers meant fresh lemonade and late-night talks under the stars. Winters meant puzzles by the fire and long drives to town for hot cocoa. He wasn't much of a talker, but he had a way of listening that made me feel heard, like whatever I said mattered. It wasn't a perfect marriage, no. We had our share of arguments about money, about how much time he spent in that workshop, about how I'd sometimes nag him for working too late. But underneath it all was a quiet kind of love, steady and familiar, like an old song that never loses its tune. Sometimes, when I hung the laundry, I'd watch him across the yard, hammer in hand, sunlight glinting off his hair, and I'd think, this is my life, and it's enough. The first sign of change came so softly, I almost missed it. It was a Thursday, late spring. The azaleas had just started to bloom, and Jack came home later than usual. I asked if he'd stopped at Miller's Hardware again, and he just smiled. A bit too quickly. Said he'd helped a new neighbor fix a mailbox post that had fallen. I didn't think much of it. Jack had always been the kind of man who'd stop to help anyone. It was one of the things I loved about him, his goodness. But then, a few days later, I noticed he'd shaved twice in one day. 30 years of marriage, and I could count on one hand the number of times he'd done that. That evening, he asked me if I'd heard about the new couple that moved in 2 doors down. "Nice folks," he said. "She's from Kentucky. Bakes a mean apple pie." I remember laughing, teasing him. "Well, tell your new friend to save me a slice." He laughed too. But his eyes, they didn't quite meet mine. A few weeks later, we were invited to a neighborhood barbecue. I still remember the way the air smelled. Smoke, grass, and a hint of rain coming. Everyone was there, laughing, drinking lemonade, kids chasing fireflies. And that's when I first met her. Clara Monroe. She wore a blue summer dress that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Her hair caught the light like copper, and her laugh, it was bright, sharp, like wind chimes in a storm. Jack introduced us. Helen, this is Clara. She and her husband just moved in. She reached out her hand and smiled, a little too wide. It's lovely to meet you, Helen. Jack's told me you're the best cook in town. I smiled back, polite as ever. Well, if he says that, then he's eaten too much of my pie. We both laughed. But underneath that laughter was something I couldn't quite name. Her husband, Tom, was quiet, a gentle man with eyes that looked tired even when he smiled. He talked about his job, their move, and how happy Clara was to have found friendly neighbors. That night, when Jack and I got home, I remember saying, "She's a bit much, isn't she?" Jack shrugged. "Just trying to be nice."
I said.
Nice can be dangerous. He didn't reply. The summer rolled on. Life seemed normal enough on the surface. But sometimes I'd find small things that didn't belong. A faint trace of perfume on his shirt that wasn't mine. A folded note in his jacket pocket that just said, "Thank you again. Couldn't have done it without you." When I asked, he brushed it off. "Just helping her fix that old fence," he said. I believed him. Or maybe I wanted to believe him. Because it's easier to trust what you know than face what you fear. He still came home every night. Still kissed my forehead. Still called me Len. But something had changed in his tone, like the warmth was still there, but the light behind it had dimmed. There's one day I'll never forget. It was our anniversary. 32 years. I'd planned a little dinner at home. Nothing fancy, just roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and his favorite chocolate cake. I even wore the blue dress he said made me look like summer. But he didn't come home. I waited. And waited. The food grew cold. The candles melted down. When the clock struck midnight, I blew out the last candle and sat there in silence. The house felt too big. Too empty. He came back around 2 in the morning. Smelled like bourbon. Said he'd been caught up at the shop. I wanted to believe that. God knows I did. But there was lipstick on his collar, the same shade Clara had worn at the barbecue. I didn't say a word. Just turned off the light and went to bed. If you've ever loved someone enough to ignore the truth, you'll understand what that silence feels like. Heavy, thick, like trying to breathe through water. The next few weeks blurred together. I kept up appearances, baking pies for the church fair, chatting with neighbors, pretending everything was fine. But inside, I was unraveling thread by thread. One afternoon, while I was hanging laundry, I saw Jack's truck parked outside Clara's house. My heart sank. He was fixing her porch steps, he said. But the look they shared when she brought him lemonade, that told me everything I didn't want to know. That night, I sat on the porch long after the sun went down. Fireflies danced in the yard, and the air smelled of honeysuckle and rain. Jack came out, sat beside me, and said, "You've been quiet lately." I just looked at him. "Have I?" He nodded, then took my hand, the same hand he'd held the day we married, and said, "You know I love you, right?" I wanted to ask who he was trying to convince, me or himself. But I just nodded. Of course. He kissed my knuckles, stood up, and went inside. And as I watched him disappear through that doorway, something inside me whispered, "You're losing him." That night, something changed, though I didn't know it yet. The weeks that followed felt like walking barefoot over broken glass. Every step hurt, but I kept going. I had to. 32 years of marriage doesn't disappear overnight. You tell yourself it's just a phase, just stress, just work. You learn to live with half-truths because the whole truth might kill you. Jack still came home, but he came home later. His shirt smelled like perfume I didn't wear. His laugh, the one that once filled our kitchen, grew quieter, like it was meant for someone else now. And Clara, she was everywhere. The grocery store, the the post office, even at church, always smiling, always waving, as if we shared some inside joke I wasn't in on. I remember one Sunday, she walked right up to me after service. She had a casserole dish in her hands, all warm and wrapped in a towel. "Oh, Helen," she said sweetly. "I made too much. Thought I'd bring some by. You don't mind, do you?" I forced a smile. "Of course not. That's very kind." She leaned closer, too close, and whispered, "You really are lucky, you know. Jack's such a good man." I froze. For a moment, I couldn't tell if she was being sincere or cruel. Her tone danced on that thin line between both. "Yes," I said quietly. "I suppose he is." She smiled wider. "Take care, dear." And with that, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the church steps like punctuation marks on a sentence I didn't want to read. That night, Jack and I barely spoke. He ate quickly, staring at his plate. When I asked about his day, he said he was tired. When I mentioned Clara's name, he dropped his fork. She's just a neighbor, Helen. Don't start with your ideas." "My ideas?" I asked softly. I didn't say anything. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "You always read too much into things. I'm just trying to help someone." I wanted to scream, "Help her how?" But instead, I picked up his plate and started washing it. That's what wives do, right? We clean up, even the messes that aren't ours. The breaking point came one afternoon in August. The air was thick with humidity, the kind that makes your skin feel like it's wearing a memory. Jack said he was heading into town to pick up supplies for the barn. I nodded, pretending not to notice that he'd put on his best shirt. After he left, I sat in silence, staring at the clock. Something in me snapped. I grabbed my keys, got in the car, and drove. I didn't even know where I was going until I did. Her house. Clara's. The curtains were half drawn, but through the gap I saw movement. 2 shadows crossing the room. My heart pounded so loud I thought it might burst through my ribs. I parked a block away and walked back, quiet as I could. And there he was, my husband, sitting at her table, laughing, his hand over hers. I stood there frozen, my breath shallow, my mind refusing to believe what my eyes saw. He leaned closer. She brushed something from his cheek. And then they kissed. It wasn't the kind of kiss you give out of pity or confusion. It was deep.
Familiar.
I stumbled back, pressing a hand to my mouth. The world went blurry. My knees almost gave out. 32 years, and that's how it ended? In a stranger's kitchen. Over a cup of coffee? I don't remember driving home. I just remember sitting in the car in our driveway, staring at the house we'd built together. Every nail, every brick, all of it suddenly felt like a lie. When he came home that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the lights off. He walked in, humming. "Helen? You in here?" I didn't answer. He flicked on the light and froze when he saw me. "Why are you sitting in the dark?" he asked. "Were you with her?" I asked quietly. His face went pale. "What? Don't lie to me, Jack. Not tonight." He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His eyes darted. To the floor, to the counter, anywhere but me. "I saw you," I whispered. "I saw you with her." The silence that followed was the loudest sound I've ever heard. Finally, he sighed. "Helen, it's not what you think." I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Oh, please. I think it's exactly what I think." He sat down across from me, rubbing his hands together. "We didn't mean for this to happen. Clara's been going through a lot." "Don't you dare make her the victim," I snapped. "You made a choice." He looked up at me then, eyes red, guilty. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I stared at him for a long time. "You didn't mean to, but you did." That night, I packed a small bag. Just essentials, clothes, my old photograph album, the quilt my mother made me when I married him. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want an apology. I just wanted air. As I closed the suitcase, he said softly, "Where will you go?" "I don't know," I said. "But somewhere I can breathe." He reached out like he wanted to stop me, but his hand fell back to his side. "Helen, please." I turned to him, tears burning my eyes. You had a choice, Jack. You chose her. Then I walked out. If you've ever had to leave behind the person who once made your world feel safe, you know that kind of pain doesn't end when the door closes. It stays. It echoes. For months, I stayed with my sister across town. She tried to comfort me, but every sound, every car engine, every laugh from a nearby porch reminded me of him. I kept replaying it all in my head, wondering what I did wrong. Was it the way I stopped wearing lipstick? The way I focused too much on the garden? Or maybe I'd just grown too quiet, and he'd mistaken my peace for absence. But as the weeks passed, anger began to replace the sadness. He didn't just betray me, I thought. He erased me. One morning, I decided to go back, not to him, but to the house. I needed closure. I told myself I'd just collect a few things and leave. When I pulled into the driveway, Clara's car was there, parked like it belonged. There were flowers on the porch, my flowers. The curtains I sewed hung in the window. It didn't look like our home anymore. It looked like theirs. I almost turned around, but something in me, something fierce, said no. I walked up to the door, knocked once. Clara answered, her expression flickering from surprise to something like guilt. Helen. Is he here? I asked. She hesitated, then nodded.
Yes.
He's in the kitchen. I stepped inside. The smell hit me first, cinnamon, sugar, something baking. It used to be our smell. My recipe. My kitchen. Jack looked up from the table, startled. Helen.
Don't stop on my account, I said.
It looks like you've made yourself comfortable. He stood up, his face pale. I told you not to come here. I laughed softly. You don't get to tell me what to do anymore, Jack. Clara shifted uncomfortably. Maybe I should. No, I said, turning to her. You stay. You should hear this too. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope I'd been carrying. Our marriage certificate, the deed to the house, everything that tied my name to the life he'd tried to erase. This house, I said quietly, is still mine. Legally, at least. I may have left, but I never signed it over. So before you two start playing house, remember whose name is still on the walls. He swallowed hard. Helen, please, this isn't what? I interrupted. Real? Funny. That's what you said when I caught you lying the first time. The air between us was thick, heavy. I could see Clara's eyes darting, unsure whether to feel ashamed or angry. Then I did something I didn't plan. I smiled. You can have him, Clara, but you'll never have peace. Because deep down, you'll always know you built your happiness on someone else's broken heart. Stay with me till the end. What I found next still keeps me awake at night. A month later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. But I knew the handwriting instantly.
Jack's.
Inside, a single line. Clara's sick. She needs help.
I stared at it for a long time.
My first instinct was to tear it up, to throw it away. But something in me, maybe that stubborn old love, whispered, go.
So I did.
When I saw her again, she was in the hospital.
Pale.
Fragile. The same woman who stole my husband now barely had the strength to lift her head. She looked at me through tired eyes and whispered, Helen, I didn't mean for it to end this way. I didn't answer, just sat beside her and held her hand. Her skin was cold, her pulse weak. And in that moment I realized revenge didn't matter anymore. She'd already lost more than I could ever take from her. Sometimes, the universe has its own way of evening the score. The winter that followed my husband's death was colder than any I'd known in the small town of Willow Bend. Snow fell softly over our porch, the same porch where Henry once sat sipping his morning coffee and humming to old country tunes. Now it stood silent, like me. But silence is a teacher, and that winter it taught me everything I needed to know about justice. Lydia, the woman who had stolen my husband, lay sick in a hospital bed not 10 miles away.
Stage 4 cancer, they said.
The same mouth that once whispered lies into my husband's ear now trembled with pain and morphine. I should have felt pity. Everyone said I was a saint for taking care of her after Henry passed. You're an angel, Martha, they said. Most women would have turned their back. They didn't know the truth. I hadn't forgiven her.
Not really.
I was just waiting. For months, I brought her meals, cleaned her sheets, and listened as she coughed out words that reeked of both regret and self-pity. She thought I did it out of kindness. She even smiled one day and said, "You must be heaven sent." Heaven had nothing to do with it. Because while she was sick in that bed, I had found something, an old tin box in Henry's drawer. Inside, there were letters.
Dozens of them.
Some from Lydia, some from Henry. Love letters.
Plans. Lies.
And then one paper that changed everything. It was the deed to our farmhouse, transferred quietly to Lydia's name 6 months before he died. My husband had left me nothing. Not the land my father helped us buy. Not the home where I raised our son. Lydia owned it all. And she didn't even know. I remember sitting by the fire that night, the papers trembling in my hands. The flames flickered against my wedding photo, Henry's hand on mine, both of us smiling, blind to the storm we'd one day walk through. I felt my heart break all over again, but beneath that heartbreak was something else but quiet, growing strength. Don't blink now, what happened next changed everything. The next morning, I went to the county office. The clerk, a young man with kind eyes, looked at me curiously when I asked about property transfers. "That farm's still under Mrs. Hollis's name," he said, "Lydia's last name. But taxes haven't been paid in 2 years." I smiled, small and sharp. "So, if the taxes remain unpaid? Well, eventually it goes up for auction." And that's when my plan began. I didn't shout, I didn't curse fate, I didn't pray for revenge. I just waited, patiently, quietly, with a calmness that scared even me. I used every penny I had left from my small pension, saved on food, sewed my own clothes, and paid attention. Lydia was too weak, too lost in her guilt to manage anything anymore. One afternoon, as I was helping her eat, she looked at me through glassy eyes and whispered, "Martha, I wish I could undo it all. He told me he'd leave you, he promised me love." I didn't flinch. I simply placed the spoon down and said softly, "He promised both of us things he never meant." Her eyes welled up, and for the first time, I saw the woman beneath the betrayal, broken, hollow, dying. But justice isn't about cruelty. It's about truth. So, as she slipped deeper into sickness, I made sure she was comfortable. I helped her write her will. She trusted me more than anyone left in her life. She said, "You're the only one who stayed, Martha. Maybe God sent you to forgive me." I almost laughed. Weeks later, as she dictated her wishes, I noticed she mentioned the farmhouse, my farmhouse. "I'll leave the property to the county," she said weakly. "Let them do something good with it." My hands tightened around the pen. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Henry built that home. Maybe it should stay with someone who loved it." She looked at me, her eyes dim and tired. "You think anyone still loves that place?" "I do," I whispered. There was a long silence. Then, with a trembling hand, she said, "Then it's yours, Martha. You've been my angel through all this." Her lawyer came the next day, and I sat beside her bed as she signed the papers, transferring everything back to me. Her signature wobbled across the page like a final confession. That night, I went home and sat on the porch again. The snow was falling, same as before, but it didn't feel cold anymore. I had taken care of the woman who stole everything from me, and in the end, she gave it all back. But it wasn't victory I felt. It was release. When Lydia passed, I stood by her graveside alone. No husband, no children. No friends came for her. Just me and the winter wind. I placed a single lily on her coffin and whispered, "You took what was never yours. But you also gave me something I didn't have before, peace." People in town still talk about how kind I was. How I looked after her till her last breath. Some say I was too good for this world. But what they'll never know is that kindness and justice sometimes wear the same face. A week later, I walked through the farmhouse, touching the walls, the windows, the creaky wooden floorboards. Everything was the same, yet everything had changed. I found Henry's old jacket still hanging behind the door. I could almost hear his laugh echo faintly in the hall. I sat by the window, watching the snow melt slowly into spring. My heart didn't ache anymore. I realized justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about living well, with dignity, after everything. I smiled to myself. You took my husband, Lydia, but I took back my soul. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved, you'll understand what I mean when I say, forgiveness isn't weakness. It's freedom. Life taught me that you don't need to shout to make things right. Sometimes, the quietest actions echo the loudest. I didn't destroy her. I simply lived long enough to watch the truth unfold. That's all the justice I ever needed. Did this story touch your heart? Don't forget to like and subscribe. It's been 3 years since Lydia passed. Sometimes I still wake up before dawn, expecting to hear Henry's soft snore beside me, or the creak of the farmhouse door opening as he steps out to feed the chickens. Habit is a strange ghost. It lingers long after the people are gone. And yes, sometimes, I still set 2 cups on the table before realizing I only need 1. I don't move the second cup right away. I let it sit there, the steam rising from it like a memory that refuses to fade. People think time heals all wounds, but that's not quite true. Time doesn't erase the pain. It just softens the edges. It teaches you how to live around it, like a tree growing around an old fence post, bending but never breaking. After Lydia's death, I spent weeks cleaning out her things from the house. It felt strange, touching her clothes, her perfume bottles, her little trinkets that used to sit on my shelves. Some of them I threw away. Some I kept. Not because I loved her, but because every item was a piece of truth, and I didn't want to forget the truth again. One day, as I sorted through a box of her old letters, I found one addressed to me. The handwriting was weak, but I knew it was hers. The envelope was yellowed and half open, as if it had been waiting for me to find it. Inside, she wrote, "Martha, you were always the woman I could never be, steady, kind, strong in silence. I thought I was taking happiness from you, but I was only stealing from myself. Thank you for taking care of me when I didn't deserve it. Maybe someday you'll find peace." I sat there for a long time, staring at her words. Tears came slowly, not the wild, choking kind, but the quiet ones that come from understanding. For years, I had carried anger like a stone in my chest. That letter, it didn't make everything right.
But it lifted something.
That night, I lit a candle by the window. One for Henry, one for Lydia. I didn't pray for them. I just let the light burn until dawn, the wax dripping slowly, like the years I'd spent in sorrow melting away. The farmhouse has changed since then. I painted the walls a soft cream, replaced the old curtains, planted wildflowers along the fence. Every morning, when I open the windows, the scent of lavender and pine fills the air, the smell of new beginnings. Children from the town sometimes visit. They love to hear my stories, though I never tell them this one. Some stories are meant to live quietly in the heart. But when I do tell stories, I speak about truth, about how love, even when broken, can still teach us who we are. Last summer, a young woman came by. She said, "Miss Martha, how did you forgive her? How did you not let hate eat you alive?" I smiled and told her, "Because hate doesn't punish the person who hurt you. It punishes you. I just got tired of carrying that weight." She nodded, her eyes shining with something that looked like hope. I realized, maybe forgiveness isn't a gift you give others, it's the medicine you take yourself. One evening, as the sun was setting behind the old oak tree, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The air was warm, the sky painted in soft gold. For a moment, I could almost feel Henry beside me again, not the man who betrayed me, but the man who once held my hand as we built this home. I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't love him either. I just understood him. People are complicated, and love is even more so. We do foolish things when we're scared of being lonely. We chase warmth, even if it burns us. And yet, somehow, life finds a way to make sense of all that pain. As the light faded, I whispered to the air, "It's all right now. You can rest." A soft wind brushed against my cheek, like a breath, like forgiveness. Every morning, I still follow the same routine: make tea, feed the chickens, water the garden. But now, there's a peace in it. A rhythm. Sometimes, the radio plays old songs from the 60s, songs Henry used to hum while fixing the fence. I don't turn it off. I let it play. The notes drift through the house, gentle and familiar, like a lullaby for all the years gone by. One song, Unchained Melody, always makes me stop whatever I'm doing. That was our song once. I used to cry when it came on. Now I just smile. Funny how the same melody can sound like pain one year and peace the next. There's a saying I tell myself now and then: you can't control who hurts you, but you can control how long you let them. That's what this house reminds me every day. It used to be the place of my greatest betrayal. Now, it's my sanctuary. Not because I forgot, but because I chose to stay. I chose to reclaim what was mine. Not the property, but my peace. Last spring, I baked an apple pie, Henry's favorite. The smell filled the whole kitchen. I caught myself laughing softly, remembering how he used to sneak a slice before it cooled. For a moment, I could almost see him again, standing by the stove with that guilty grin. And I thought, maybe that's what forgiveness really is, remembering without bitterness. So I took that pie to the nursing home nearby and shared it with some of the old folks there. I told them, this pie used to remind me of betrayal. Now it just reminds me that life goes on. They laughed. One woman said, you sound like you've lived 100 lives. Maybe I have. At night, I write in my journal small things like what the sky looked like that day, or what the sparrows were up to. I don't write about the past much anymore. But sometimes, when I close the book, I say quietly to myself, thank you, Lydia, for teaching me what love isn't, so I could finally learn what peace is. And I mean it. Now the farmhouse is warm again. My days are quiet but full of little things that matter. The smell of coffee at sunrise. The hum of the old clock. The sound of rain against the window. Sometimes I sit by the porch swing and just listen to the world breathe. And in those moments I feel him and her and all the years in between. Not as ghosts haunting me, but as lessons that finally made me whole. If you've ever been through something like that, if you've ever been broken and somehow found your way back to yourself, you know what I mean. Life doesn't hand out perfect endings. It just gives you quiet ones, the kind where you can sit alone, drink your tea, and know that your heart is finally still. I lost a husband, I lost trust, but I found myself. And that's worth everything. Did you feel her pain? Tell me what city you're listening from. I love reading your stories. If this touched your heart, subscribe and stay with me for more true feeling life journeys.